Hey there and welcome back to Rimworld. My name is Pete and today we complete another episode of our Rimworld Extreme Desert Challenge. In the last episode we took a first look at the recent 1.2 update, we also constructed a workshop, a butchering room, a kitchen and a small freezer, and we replaced our iguana biceps with 3 ducks. At the end of the episode then we brought in a long-awaited harvest, so to start things off today you can see Red Hawk put down a few new rice plants. By the way, yes, Steak and Troy are also both still resting and recovering. They both got into a lengthy fistfight in the last video, and even though that may have helped them blow off some steam, it will now take a while until they both make a full recovery. So this first day here very much belongs to Red Hawk and Edmo, who make sure that our food production remains on track. They are also both hauling back a bit of the steel that Red Hawk mined in the last episode, until in the early evening things suddenly go dark as an eclipse sets across the desert. But that is nothing that we have to worry too much about, so we can queue up our first small construction project, a tool cabinet for the workshop. This will improve the work speed of both the tailoring bench and the stonecutter's table, and especially the latter is used rather frequently, so even though it costs 200 units of steel, I think this is a worthwhile investment. Shortly after then, we are unfortunately back to the regular schedule. After pointlessly flirting with Red Hawk for the entire day, Edmo once again suffers a mental break. This time, however, it is only 8 days, so there is no need to arrest him for a change. But with Troy and Steak both still recovering, this leaves our colony rather unproductive for the time being. So the next day understandably starts off slow, with Red Hawk doing a bit of feeding, cleaning and hauling. To spice things up a little, we then receive the first quest of today's episode, and this one sounds interesting, albeit not terribly urgent. We have what appear to be 2 refugees here who seek shelter inside of our colony. If we offer them some, they will behave more or less like regular colonists, however, after 14 days they will eventually leave again. Now, there is a chance that they do in fact join us for good after that period, but they might also have much more sinister intentions and could potentially turn out to be hostile. In turn, since they're refugees with no faction affiliation, we could in theory also do with them whatever we please, however, that would most definitely destroy any chances of obtaining a reward. Now, since I doubt and actually know for a fact that we will not see this quest expire during today's episode, I would be very happy if you could let me know your thoughts on it. Should we take it for the potential reward, or should we avoid the risks at all costs? Now, eventually, in the early afternoon, Troy gets back out of bed, fully healed and ready to take on more research. Just in that moment, we are also informed of a crashed escape pod, so let's see who we can find inside. Okay, now in terms of traits and abilities, this right here looks like an absolutely fantastic colonist. Quick sleeper, fast learner, fast walker, those are some of the best traits in the game in my opinion, not to mention solid combat proficiency as well as a few other useful skills. Unfortunately though, the prosthetic arm here is kind of a deal breaker. This will drastically reduce the working speed of Kilroy here, and even though it is just one arm, that arm will be used for plenty of things, so despite the recent troubles with Edmo, I don't think this is a worthwhile addition to our colony. Still, we will continue our somewhat civilized streak and send Red Hawk out to help, but surprisingly enough, it never comes to that. It looks like Kilroy wasn't all that injured in the first place, so he is already back up on his feet and tending to his wounds. Now at this point he is pretty much ready to go and will begin wandering off the map. However, if we let him do that, then this encounter will pass by as if nothing ever happened. Luckily for us, there is a way to at least get something out of it. Unfortunately though, that involves arresting Kilroy, at least very briefly. Thanks to Red Hawk's extremely high social skill, our prisoner does not resist, and so after a few moments he is locked away. We also find 5 units of flake on him, which might make for a nice trading good. The main reason we arrested him, however, is this one right here. Our relationship with his faction will improve significantly if we now release him again. And no, this is something that would not have happened had we simply let him wander off. So after a quick stay in the Steakhouse Hotel, Kilroy can now be on his way again. The flake now belongs to us, but at least he remains unharmed, which is a lot more than previous prisoners were able to say. Before he can make it off the map though, the next challenge awaits us. Just in this moment, a heatwave strikes the desert. Although I think with dusters on everyone and coolers also researched now, our colony is well prepared. Kilroy, meanwhile, has safely made it off the map and we have received our +12 faction relation bonus. And who knows, maybe we can one day even become allies with this faction. For the time being though, let's worry about our own colonists, who have all received a small +2 mood bonus for releasing a prisoner, so Kilroy's short stint within our walls definitely paid off in more than one way. As the sun then finally shows itself again, Edmo also comes out of his daze, and understandably I think he immediately gets some rest. Now, at this point, the heatwave is in fact becoming a small problem, not for our colonists, but for our 3 ducks. As you can see, temperatures are currently approaching 50 degrees Celsius, and that is way too much for our feathered friends. So let's temporarily relocate them into our freezer, which we will of course no longer have at sub-zero temperatures, but at a much more comfortable and desert-adequate 30 degrees Celsius. Shortly after the ducks have been relocated, Steak is then also finally fully healthy again, and so I think we can now take care of a certain quest that we received in the last episode. Now, in the comments of that last episode, there were quite a few of you who spoke out in favor of simply skipping this one, but I also received quite a few good ideas on how to tackle it relatively risk-free, and that is because this mechanoid cluster does in fact not include a single moving mechanoid unit. All we will be facing are stationary mech turrets, and with a bit of luck we should be able to outmaneuver them. Now, regarding the reward, I was very tempted by Shaw here, maybe even as a replacement for a certain, more troublesome colonist of our own, but I fear that we will in the end not really get much of an upgrade here with Shaw. His too smart trait unfortunately would make him very mentally fragile, so the frequent mental breaks would very likely continue with him as well. So instead we're going for the side trainer and the joy wire implant as a reward. Perhaps we can use both of those to our advantage as well. And here we are, the mechanoid cluster has arrived. Now that big thing in the middle is the psychic droner, and it is surrounded by 5 turrets. Now, at the moment, the entire setup is not active. That will change, however, as soon as we enter that red radius of the proximity activator. This means, in theory, we could simply let this structure be, at least for 13 days, because at that point the psychic droner will activate and things will get very uncomfortable for our colonists. Don't worry though, we will not let it come to that. Instead, we will equip Edmo with a shield belt and a thrombo horn, and then we will send him out to take on the alien machinery all by himself. Again, for the initial approach, he is not in any danger of being shot at by the turrets, but as soon as he gets too close, that will change. That is where his shield belt comes into play though, which should keep him relatively safe, as we are of course also choosing a position here that does not expose him to enemy fire too much. One huge tactical advantage is then the fact that these auto-charge turrets here have a minimum fire radius, which means they cannot target anyone within 4 tiles of them. And as you can see, this leaves Edmo with plenty of time to destroy the turret, and once it is down he can move on to the much weaker mini-slugger turret. Now that one does actually keep firing at him even at close range, but the shield belt holds and just a few hits are enough to destroy it. Now at this point we can move on and take on the 3 turrets on the other side. Once again, the large one can't do anything about it, however Edmo is at the moment exposed to fire from the 2 smaller ones. As you can see though, that does not stop him, and the first turret is destroyed in just a few hits. The second turret here even explodes violently, taking the other one with it, but again, thanks to his shield belt, Edmo escapes unharmed. All that is left now is the psychic droner itself, and fortunately that one cannot fight back, it only has a ton of hit points. And here we are, quest completed, and Atmo did not suffer even a single scratch, and that is exactly how I had hoped this would go. Now, from the mechanoid wreckage here, we obtain a decent amount of steel, plasteel, and components. The real reward, however, is now arriving in drop pods. The steakhouse has now obtained a joy wire implant as well as another side trainer. All of those materials can now be hauled back into our storage room, and with that, it is already time to go to sleep for everyone. So let us skip ahead a few hours and rejoin Colony Founder Steak. As you can see, he has just dismantled our fueled stove, because we do have access to electricity now, so I think building an electrical stove is long overdue. This means we will also be able to cut down on our wood consumption, and going forward we will need that wood for buildings and furniture of all sorts, and since we're in the desert with limited growing space, our wood supply is unfortunately not going to get any larger anytime soon. Shortly after, we then receive another quest asking us to take part in a psychic experiment. If we let all females of the colony be psychically suppressed for 6.5 days, then we will receive another reward. And to be honest, at least the tech print reward here does look intriguing, and I am also moderately confident in Red Hawk's ability to handle this. However, for the moment we'll leave it be, because we have bigger things to worry about. Now, what comes next is an idea that I think was also pitched in one of the comments of the last episode, because that joy wire implant we just obtained, yep, we are going to install that one, and as you may have been able to guess already, Atmo is going to be the lucky recipient. Since we now have lights, we no longer need to remove any roof tiles for the operation, which in turn also drastically improves the surgery success chance. Now, regarding what we're actually installing here, the joy wire implant has two effects on the colonist. The main one is a permanent plus 30 mood bonus, which I think should solve most of Atmo's mental break problems once and for all. Now, on the downside, it also reduces consciousness by 20%, which means Atmo will be quite a bit slower in the future. And make no mistake about it, this is going to be a noticeable penalty. However, I still believe that a colonist who can work constantly, albeit at reduced speed, that such a colonist is preferable to one who works at a normal speed, but suffers a rather predictable mental break every 3 or 4 days. So let's see how this goes. We are working with regular medicine here to improve the odds even further, and this is not too difficult of a procedure. Alright, looks like everything went according to plan. Atmo will now suffer the anesthetic side effects for a while, but long term he should be much happier with his life, even if Red Hawk continues to reject his advances. Now, up next we are going to build ourselves a wooden art bench, because we do actually have a rather gifted sculptor in Troy, who should be able to make the base a bit more pleasant to look at, that is when he's not busy researching. Art bench and armchair are then quickly finished, but we are not going to leave them outside. Instead, we will temporarily remove the tailoring bench from our small workshop and then put the art bench in its place. That way it can benefit from the tool cabinet's work speed bonus, and considering that making art and sculptures is a rather lengthy process, I think this is very much worth it. We will then get started and have Troy make a small marble sculpture. We have plenty of marble lying around already, and it is the most beautiful of the 5 stone types in the game, so Troy can get to work right away. In the meantime, Red Hawk has harvested another batch of herbal medicine, so at least on that front we have a healthy supply, and together with Atmo she can now already put the next plants into the ground. Shortly after, Atmo then receives a shoot frenzy inspiration, and being in a good mood does actually increase the likelihood of these inspirations appearing, so already the joy wire implant seems to be paying off. Just a few hours later, Redhawk then experiences the same inspiration, so should someone decide to attack our colony in the next few days, then I would say our chances at survival have just improved quite a bit. But, as always, Randy Random gives and takes in equal amounts, and so a low-level psychic drone affecting all females does not come as too much of a surprise here. Now again, I don't think Redhawk will be too bothered by it. Perhaps this can even be seen as a good test for that quest we still have waiting down the line. In any case, Redhawk will now temporarily leave the colony anyway, because as you may have noticed, our food supplies are dwindling fast, so I would say it's time to pay our neighbors a visit and purchase some more. Now we will be selling the Flake, a couple of weapons that we no longer need, and the psychic animal pulsar that we found in the ruins up north. Yes, this is a useful artifact and its value is certainly justified, but we are not really living in an animal-rich biome here, and we also have much more pressing needs as well. We will also not give Redhawk any food for the journey, after all the trip should not take her too long, and of course she will also purchase some, so at least for the way back she should have enough. Now, while Redhawk is on her way, Edmo makes some meals from our last potatoes, so as you can see, it is high time to restock our food supplies. Following that, we will also have Edmo put some solar panels down. Steak, meanwhile, has taken over Troy's job at the research bench, so for a change, he will not be able to help out with the project. And just as the two panels are installed, Redhawk arrives at her destination, so let's see what we can grab here. First of all of our goods are worth just under 500 silver, and then we can see our friends of the Black Troska tribe do have another pair of ducks for sale. Now, we don't need another male one, but the female one will gladly take, alongside roughly 200 units of pemmican. And that's all. That should last our colony for at least a few days. However, I think the rather urgent need for hydroponics has become a lot more obvious. Back in the steakhouse, meanwhile, Troy is about to finish his very first sculpture, and even though it's nothing spectacular, it does come with a pretty nice beauty rating of 68. Installing it inside of our commons/throne room now makes this a slightly impressive room, which should further improve the mood of our colonists at least a tiny little bit. Now, in the meantime, Edmo has begun work on another small project, because yes, again, food is in short supply, and even with hydroponics we should make use of all the available growing space we have. So he is now putting down another small potato field here, while later that evening Steak starts fencing it in. You have probably also seen that we moved the stonecutter's table back out of the workshop and next to our cactus farm. That part of the base will receive some work in just a moment. For now, the heatwave comes to an end, and with it our need to cool down the ducks. Speaking of which, here is Redhawk arriving back home, and with duck number 4 in tow. Chosen from the list of patrons in the naming rights tier and above, this one will from now on go by the name of Sputnik, and it will join its companions in their temporary enclosure. A few hours later, the psychic drone also vanishes, and we can watch Redhawk and Edmo chop some wood. Steak, meanwhile, is constructing another small room to house the stonecutter's table, while the workshop now has another open spot for a new workstation. Before we can construct that, however, a solar flare strikes the desert, and with it all our electrical devices shut down. Good thing the heatwave ended prior to this, otherwise our ducks would definitely have suffered a bit. Fortunately enough though, the solar flare only lasts for a few hours, and we're up and running again in the very early morning hours. At this point we can also build an electric smelter next to the stonecutter's table, as this right here will eventually become our material manufacturing room, where we make stone blocks and steel for all of our building projects. A group of travelers is now also passing by, but once again they have nothing to trade and remain of little interest to us. The smelter, meanwhile, is quickly finished, but for the moment it is of no use since we don't have any steel chunks to smelt. We would need to carry those back to the base first. By the way, our ducks have moved back into their old home, making room in the freezer for actual food. Shortly after, Redhawk chops down another cactus, and that is what I had been waiting for, because we now have enough wood to upgrade our manual tailoring bench, which we have already deconstructed, to an electric one. I have also moved the art bench over to the other side of the workshop because it doesn't need electricity, although after putting down the conduits for the smelter, that would not have been necessary. The tailoring bench can then also be used right away because Troy here is currently wearing a rather tattered button-down shirt, so let's have Edmo make him a new one. Our visitors, meanwhile, enjoy a meal inside of our throne room, something that our colonists can only dream of, as we are once again almost out of food. And no, Steak is not digging up corpses for that reason. He simply doesn't have anything else to do at the moment, so I thought we might as well have him clean up the graves. Edmo then finishes the shirt and Troy puts it on immediately, and at that point our guests are also already leaving again. Now, it would technically be possible to also arrest some of these guys and continue to cheese the faction relation bonus, but I honestly feel like that is not the way this mechanic is intended to be used. It would additionally also give us free access to all of their weapons and belongings, including their remaining meals, which again I feel is just a little too easy. I just wanted to point that out because I'm really not sure if this is something that should be patched or if I'm simply overlooking something, but to me this appears to be a bit of a flawed mechanic. Anyway, we can now have Steak turn off our electrical devices, which I would really like to get a mod for, by the way, but unfortunately the one I'm currently looking at has not yet been updated to version 1.2 of the game. And so, another day in the extreme desert slowly comes to an end as Edmo prepares the last meal of the day and promptly consumes it himself. In the meantime, Troy finishes the research of hydroponics, so you can already place your bets what we're going to build in the next episode to hopefully end our food struggles for the time being. For today, I think this marks a good point to make the cut. Again, let me know what you think regarding the several quests that we could tackle at this point. Should we take in the refugees? Should Redhawk take part in the psychic suppression experiment? Leave a comment down below with your thoughts on the subject. Now, if you enjoyed today's episode, then I would also be very happy if you could leave a thumbs up, and if you like what I'm doing and want to support me and my channel further, then feel free to subscribe, grab some merch over on shop.petecomplete.com, or check out and maybe even pledge to the Pete Complete Patreon. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.